I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. As is probably true with some of the people in this room, my life has been an inexplicable journey, and I will try not to make it anything but inexplicable. In 1976, I left my budding career as a special educator for the blind and began a journey that led me to begin teaching about self-knowledge and inner guidance. Two things that I found to be extremely important. In 1982, I had an epiphany of a great presence that came upon me. A presence so powerful that it shattered my life and set me on a different course. And for the next year, I wandered. After that event, I gave up all my students. I left a long-term relationship without explanation. I left my home. I gave up my position, my expertise, what I thought was my brilliance, everything that would distinguish me, to a point where when people would ask, "What are you doing right now?" It was very hard to answer that question. But where are you heading? Very hard to answer that question. And so I wandered for a year, and then at the end of that year, in the Southern California desert, the voice returned and said, "You'll begin to speak now. And what you will receive is unlike anything you have ever heard or read." And after considerable trepidation, I began to speak. And I began to write. And indeed, what I spoke and what I write was unlike anything I had read or heard before. This was the beginning of a 24-year revelation that would unfold very slowly. And I, having many of the normal human tendencies, was very anxious to know what it was going to be about and where it was going to lead my life and where was the conclusion of this unfolding revelation. But the revelation would only come as revelations come. And I had to wait 24 years to be able to see in its entirety what this was. Now, during this time, I began to write books. I would say receive books. In 1989, after another 7-year sojourn of teaching in major cities all over the United States, I received Steps to Knowledge. This big gold book. I received this book in 14 days in a state of revelation. And after I received it and it was transcribed, I began to study it, to take the steps to knowledge. And then other people began to take these steps with me. And then began a series of other books, eventually some 20 volumes, that would comprise literally a new message for humanity. And this new message would cover an immensely large number of subjects. In fact, the 2 volumes of Wisdom from the Greater Community cover 70 subjects. And again, this was original teaching. It was not a patchwork work of all kinds of little things that I had picked up along the way, all pieced together in my own way. This was an original work, something that was happening through me and to me. And during this time, a small number of people gathered to study this material. And then in 1997, the Allies of Humanity briefings began. The first set of briefings was received within 1 year, and in year 2000, the second set of briefings was received in 24 hours. What this has all come to be is a preparation for a future that will be unlike the past. A preparation not just for a few elite individuals, a few special people, but for people all around the world. It is not a preparation that everyone can do, but it is a preparation that many people will need to do or to consider at least in order to understand what's coming over the horizon for humanity and the great threshold times that we live in. Now, I understand that you're here this weekend because you feel in some way that we are living in threshold times, and that what happens over the next few years is going to be very consequential, not only for us personally, but for people all around the world. And whatever avenue our study might exist in, we see the evidence of great change upon us. And this change is indeed greater than most people realize. And this afternoon, I'd like to share some of this with you. And in doing so, I'm going to take you into the darkness. We're going to be with some things that can be very difficult to be with. And most people are not able to be with these things yet. And they fly in the face of many of our ideas and our beliefs and our assumptions. And they seem fantastic. And they can seem dreadful. But they also hold a key to who we are and why we're in the world at this time. And they're very important in that sense, because what will call out of us our real purpose and mission for being in the world is not pleasantries, is not having our needs satisfied, is not living a suburban kind of spiritual lifestyle, but responding to greater needs in the world that will call out of us the greatness that we have come to share, our unique gift to a world in need. So to have that calling take place, we must be with certain things, and we must consider them for ourselves and enter into a kind of relationship with them. So today, I'm going to take you into the darkness, but I'm going to bring you out of the darkness, because you do not want to stay in the darkness. Now, this revelation that I have received in its entirety contains a warning, a blessing, and a preparation. The warning is that we are heading into a critical period of human history, which can lead to either a greater success or a greater failure in the experiment of civilization. We are also at the threshold of encountering a greater community of intelligent life in the universe. And now that we have become a global people, a global society, a technological society, there are many others in our vicinity in the universe who are taking great interest in us, including many who have never been here before. In totality, we are standing at the greatest event in human history. And very few people see it, feel it, or know it. So for the few who do, you're going to be burdened with a kind of weight of seeing things that other people don't see, of feeling things that other people don't feel, of having concerns that others do not have. And the frustration of attempting to communicate that to your family and your friends, to blank faces, to wondering looks, even to laughter or ridicule, because that is the burden of seeing and knowing. It does separate you, at least temporarily, from everyone else. It is a burden, and yet it is a responsibility. So I would like then to begin this journey with you today, and if time allows, I would like to take a few moments of reprieve as we go along so that you can be with the things that I'm sharing with you and also your own experience. Because my interest today is not simply to give you more information, particularly if you're really hungry for information. Information for me is secondary. What's more important is the connection and the presence and what we can see and what we can know and feel. Because that is the real navigator within us. That is the divine navigation system that we have. that we must learn to rely upon ever increasingly in these times of great change. I'd like to say then at the outset that a great deal of conspiracy literature and some of the important things that have been revealed to us through it give us a sense that someone's really in control. Even though we don't feel in control, somebody somewhere is in control, pulling the strings, making things happen for their own ends, no doubt. But what I'm here to say to you today is that no one is in control. And that's part of the calamity that we're facing. We are not in control. Those who we think are in control are not in control. They're attempting to be in control, but what's coming over the horizon will be beyond their reach, and they will have little power over it, and it will have great power over them. So I'd like to just allow this idea to settle for a moment and ask the question, is anyone really in control? Perhaps it satisfies a need in us to think that someone's in control. If not an elected officials, then someone who stands behind them or above them. But I pose the question to you today, is anyone really in control? Or are we all racing towards a future for which we're unprepared? There are 5 ideas I'd like to share with you today, and I'm going to define them briefly, but I'll be referring to them as we go along. The first is the great waves of change. This represents the result of humanity's immense impact upon the world, its impact upon our ability to live in this world, upon the resources of this world, upon the stability of humanity fundamentally, beyond politics, beyond commerce, beyond what we usually think of as very significant in determining our fate and our future. The second term is the greater community. And the greater community represents the totality of intelligent life in the universe. Whether it be your local universe or all universes, that's up to you. It's all big enough. The greater community. When I say it's a greater community, I don't mean that it's together in any sense, or that it's organized in any sense, or that it's being managed by anyone, but it's just a greater community. And that we as human beings represent a greater community here. And our greater community is going to have to deal with that greater community. And we'll be talking about that as we go along. The next really important term is the word knowledge. And by knowledge, I do not mean a body of information. I do not mean an expertise or a science. I'm talking about a deeper intelligence within us that God has put within us. An intelligence that's only answerable to God. An intelligence that's beyond our manipulation. We can't change it or use it, harness it for our own personal ends. It's actually a greater intelligence within us that's here to protect us, to guide us, and to lead us to a greater fulfillment and contribution in the world. And as you will see, this knowledge, which seems so ephemeral, is actually critically important in dealing with the influences that are upon us, both within our human world and within the greater community itself. The next idea is the mental environment. And this is the environment of thought and the environment of influence. It's a much more powerful environment than the physical environment we live in. It's invisible, and so we don't think about it very much. We don't consider how we're going to deal with it very much because it seems so intangible. And yet everyone in this room and everyone who may hear this recording has experienced the mental environment. If you went into every house on any street, you would feel the unique mental environment of that house. And that environment is the product of the thinking, feelings, and emotions of the people who live there. And likewise, there's a mental environment in nature, which is far more neutral than the mental environment that we usually encounter in our human involvements. But it too has some remarkable dynamics as well. In terms of our encounter with life from beyond the world, the learning and the teaching about the mental environment is of paramount importance. And the last thing I'd like to speak on briefly is higher purpose. The revelation that has been given to me emphasizes, and of course this is not new, that we've each been born with a greater purpose and mission in life. And the extent to which we are close to that or connected to that is the extent to which we feel meaning and direction and have integrity. And the extent to which we're divorced from that or unaware of that, we are in confusion and we are frustrated and we are disconnected. And that this higher purpose represents the key to what real happiness is, what real fulfillment is. And it emerges out of our relationship with the world, not our relationship with ourself. And I'll be speaking about that as we go along. Part of this new message has a prophetic vision for the future. And this is contained in the warning. And this warning is given out of a sense of great love and respect for us. It is a warning to prepare us so that we will understand what we must do and know to be able to navigate the difficult times ahead and to be able to emerge from that in a greater state of unity and purpose in the world. Because the entire landscape of the world is going to be changed. And whether that leads to the breakdown of civilization or to a renewal of civilization is largely up to us, both individually and collectively. So the prophetic vision, and this was given years before we knew anything about climate change. I knew anything about climate change. It was given years before we knew about peak oil or peak energy, declining resources. And I had to live with this revelation, which nobody wants to hear about. It's too rough and tumble for the spiritual people, and it's too spiritual for the pragmatists. As we stand at this moment, we have great converging waves of change. They're all happening at the same time. They're largely the product of our use and abuse and overuse of this world. And the way we live, all of us, not just the rich and the affluent and the greedy, but all of us, that is going to change our relationship with the world itself. Instead of being an endless cornucopia to give us whatever we want, we're going to have to rebalance and redefine our relationship with the world, which is something that's so easy to forget about. As we gain a new relationship with our computer or our handheld device or our technology or our problems or our goals, we forget that we have a fundamental relationship with the world. And this relationship has the power to undo everything we've ever created. And it's not up to our control. It's a dynamic relationship. We affect it, it affects us. The great waves of change basically mean that we're living in a world of declining resources, a world of environmental decline, a world of declining energy, a world that we are going to have to contend with increasingly. It is such a fundamental relationship. It's like the relationship with your body. We all forget about we have a body and we just assume it's always going to be there. And then one day we have a mass in our chest. And all of a sudden our relationship with our body becomes the most important thing in our life. Whereas for the last 30 years, we never gave it a second thought. We just dragged it around. And we misused it perhaps and abused it. Us coming back to this fundamental relationship with the world is so really incredible. And like all incredible things, it's scarier than you can imagine. And more significant and more promising than anything else. So we have a point then where we have to choose. Do we want peace or do we want change? A lot of people want both. How many people want both peace and change? I'm the only one on camera, so I'm the only one. Well, peace and change are rather incompatible. If you've ever gone through a real change yourself, was it very peaceful? Were you entirely willing to go through it? Were you in a state of bliss? Were you very compliant? Or did you rage and struggle and fight and blame through that change? Maybe prolonging the agony of that change. Of course, change is difficult. I, as a spiritual teacher, cannot promise you peace if I'm advocating change. You may have moments of profound peace and equanimity, but I bring not peace but a sword. That's what that means. I'm going to change your life. You're just sending someone into a really difficult process that they may not wholeheartedly want. And that is exactly the process that life and the world is going to give us now. And how we go through this change, whether we go fighting and screaming and blaming, projecting our anger onto others, competing for the resources of the world, fighting till the end, struggling with each other, or whether we recognize that united is the only way we're going to stand in the face of all this, is a fundamental decision. The great ways of change. And to give into how we're equipped right now, we are not prepared for this change. Given where we are, how we think, how we live, we are way behind in preparing for this change. Because in the face of this change, the thin veneer of civility disappears. And humanity's greatness and its ruthlessness both emerge out of these kinds of circumstances. The four critical things that will enable us to continue or not are food, water, energy, and the pressures of competition. Food, water, energy, and the pressures of competition. With global warming, food production will decline. And so will the availability of fresh water, particularly in areas of the world where millions of people live. I just returned from Jerusalem. I went there to listen to people. And I listened to Israeli soldiers and Israeli citizens. And I listened to imams in the West Bank. And I went into the Palestinian territory. And I listened to shopkeepers and men on the street who were kind enough to entrust me with their experience. And what I heard in total was an incredibly politicized environment where you have the Jewish position and the Palestinian position, and within each position, you have a whole range of positions, all the way from compromise and conciliation to no compromise and conquest, and everyone thinks they're right. And they can historically demonstrate why they're right. And they can show you the list of grievances that they have suffered through to demonstrate why their position is tenable and supportable and correct. And it's a complete stalemate. Even if other nations were not sending arms and money to these two competing entities, it would still be the same. Meanwhile, Israel is running out of water. While its populations boom, while Jewish settlement is encouraged, already they are beyond sustainability in water. Where is it going to come from? It's not there. It's being used to the max. The Dead Sea is sinking. There's no water coming into it. But it's not part of anyone's conversation. I asked about the water. Oh, yes. One Palestinian man said, yes, we have the best water in the world from the Judean hills, and the Israelis are taking it all. It's true. They are. This is the beginning of resource wars. Petroleum, water. It'll all be masked in politics and ideology and religion, but fundamentally, it's a struggle to survive in a world in decline. And in the Middle East, you have all the nations there facing this kind of prospect of decline. Through global warming, 10 or 15% of their water diminishes. You're going to have a humanitarian crisis of unbelievable proportions. And this is just in one place. A lot of people need to move with nowhere to go. Now, this is not doom and gloom. This is love. This is compassion. This is reality. This is what can speak to the heart. When you get out there and you really listen to people, and everyone I listen to, I could really connect with them. I mean, they're all very real people, and I felt for them. And I felt the tenuousness of their situation. And I had no answers. No good ideas from America. These are the great ways of change. They're already affecting the world. Right now. So the people in Central Africa cannot afford, the hospitals cannot afford medicine, nor they can afford the petroleum to transport the medicine. Right now. People come to the hospital and they die. Right now. We're so buffeted in the United States that to us it's a mere inconvenience. To people in other places, it's a major change in their circumstances. This is just the beginning of the great waves of change. And it's interesting that as you begin to be with this, if you have the heart to be with it, you realize that there's two groups that face the greatest set of consequences in the face of the great waves. One is the very poor, whose lives are immediately impacted, and the other is the very rich, whose immunity and whose wealth begins to decline, whose assets become worthless, whose vulnerability in the community becomes very great. They have the most to lose, except for the very poor. For the rest of everyone in the middle, it's just an increasing situation of inconvenience and complication. I'm not going to go into this very far because you can do this yourself. And so while people are down here on the ground pointing their fingers at each other, the great waves are happening and no one is responding. And this is the problem with problems. Big problem, little reaction. Little problem, big reaction. And those powers in the world that we give so much power to, that seem to be controlling things and benefiting from war and manipulating economies, they're out of control. They don't have an answer. They're struggling to do something. They're much more worried than you are. Well, there may be some very rich people in the room, so maybe I shouldn't make that generalization. They're really worried because they could lose it all quickly. Humanity is so overstretched that even minor events create major consequences. The rich feel this, and they're out of control. Should have pity on them, even just for a moment. From my perspective, I don't dehumanize anybody. I don't dehumanize the controllers, the manipulators, because when you dehumanize somebody, you lose some of your humanity. When you turn them into beasts, part of you is now more of a beast. And I'm very pro-human. And so they're all human beings, and we're all in this lifeboat together. And even if they've behaved very badly and very selfishly, I do not dehumanize them. And I encourage you not to dehumanize them. Because I tell you, given the same set of circumstances and the same forces acting upon them, if you were in their situation, you would be doing much the same thing. And they are suffering. Now, what we have in all this is a credible failure of leadership. I think we can all acknowledge that. The leaders are in a conundrum. They can't confess to the people that they're out of control because our whole economy is based on confidence and on speculation, based on confidence. You take away the confidence and the whole thing begins to unravel, to slow down. And so you're basically caught in a vacuum of truth. If you don't tell the truth for long enough, when you finally do, it's terrible. If you've done something wrong or something wrong has happened and you don't tell the truth about it for years, when you finally do, it's traumatic. So we have a failure of leadership. And it's a failure of the human heart. Nobody wants to be the bringer of bad news. And people want to hear good news. Well, I have good news today, but I have some bad news first. So I'm going to go through the bad news, and then I'm going to bring you the good news, because the good news is really good, and the bad news is really bad. But the situation is much darker than most people realize. It's so dark that it's like a black hole and can suck you in. And this is one of the dangers of studying evil, and I think I'll mention this now. When you look at corruption at whatever level, you look at, we could call it evil for now, it's very seductive. It draws you in. Evil is a power that loves to be studied. If it's your calling in life to reveal evil, to expose and to fight evil, then you have to accept this risk that evil will seduce you, or try to. And it will make you grave and humorless. And it will make your vision dark. And it will destroy your motivation and your enthusiasm. And it will lead you to hopelessness and a sense of helplessness. Because I tell you, evil isn't just bad people doing bad things. It's people who have lost any sense of who they are and why they're here. They're not evil, but this is the product of evil. The result of evil. And it's pervasive. When you begin to see how pervasive it is, when you see how ill-equipped people are psychologically to be able to deal with real-world problems, particularly of a larger nature, they just drop the ball. Well, I can't do anything. This is overwhelming. I can't handle this. Nobody can do anything. It's over. It's the end times. That's the voice of someone who hasn't been paying attention for the last 20 years and all of a sudden has to face something that is literally beyond their capacity in that moment. They can build that capacity, but it's going to be difficult. So this brings us now to the second great event in our life that has the power to utterly change the landscape of humanity. And it's connected to the first, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. And that is our encounter with a greater community of intelligent life in the universe. And I'd like to share with you some things that this new message that I'm a part of and responsible for to a large degree has revealed about this greater community. Because I know the universe is a wonderful blank canvas upon which we can project all our ambitions and our hopes for a better life and better leadership and salvation and wonderful technology and all these great things. And people do project those onto life in the universe. Sort of, it is whatever you want it to be. And that's because we have no reality with it. Well, this new revelation has given us a lot of reality, both through the Allies of Humanity briefings and through greater community spirituality. And what it reveals is that we live in a universe that's greatly inhabited. And there are certain parts of the universe that are more highly inhabited than others. And where our world exists in a greatly inhabited part of the universe, which gives us certain advantages and certain disadvantages in terms of our future and our destiny there. What's out there, as far as we're concerned, are friends, not really friends, but potential allies, adversaries, and competitors. Because the greater community is in a competitive environment on a scale that we can't even imagine. It is not the ethereal plane. It is not our heavenly home. It's not filled with enlightened beings shepherding humanity towards enlightenment. Those are dreams and fantasies. As above, so below. This is the greater community. And we're the little kids just leaving the house for the first time. And out there is a big neighborhood. And there are bigger kids that run this neighborhood. And we're the little kid on the block who doesn't know anything. The other thing that the new message reveals about the greater community is the first to reach our shores. And this is very common in the universe, will be resource explorers and economic collectives. Resource explorers are resource explorers. Economic collectives are it's very hard to describe. They are multiracial, and they're out to do business. And we're part of the business. And they're looking for resources. And they value our world for its strategic position, though we don't know why. They have no interest in us. They're not interested in our spirituality. You're not interested in learning how to reproduce or be spiritual. Look, we have to grow up a little bit here. We're sitting on a gem of a world that is valued by others. We are the native people of this world. We've been here long enough to be the native people, despite any controversy about our early origins. And what has history taught us about intervention? For that is what we are experiencing. It has taught us that intervention is always carried out for self-interest, and that the native peoples, if they succumb, will be subjugated and their cultures, in most cases, disintegrated. This is the lesson of nature, competition for environment. Now, it is possible that those visiting our world who do not represent our allies are here for other purposes, but if their purpose is benign or beneficial to humanity, that would have to be demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt. And given the surreptitious nature of this visitation, this intervention, giving the taking of people against their will, giving the subjugation of those people to all kinds of inhumane practices, given the attempt to manipulate people in positions of power and authority, one would strain credulity to believe that those who are intervening in our world, who have a presence here now, are here for our benefit. This, of course, brings up a lot of questions. People think, well, if they wanted to take the world, they just take the world. If they have advanced technology, if they wanted the world, they just take it. And if they're not taking it, means, they're probably not hostile and they do not have a hostile intent. This is a projection of our very still primitive human understanding of how power works. And those races who are here to gain advantage in the world, to take control of the world's resources. Its people are part of that resource. They do not want to destroy the resources of the world. They're a very small force. They're not military. How do you gain the alliance of people whom you want to become your subjects? If you're an advanced race with no weapons. Think about today in our world. Who are the conquistadors of our day and age? But the man with the briefcase and the cell phone, who's going to embed himself in some culture and begin to persuade people in positions of power of the benefits of a collusive relationship with that individual. And certain gifts will be given to people in positions of power and promises of more to come. And this is the insidious nature of modern conquest, even within our own world. It's too reprehensible just to go in and just take people by force. Though that still does happen. In the universe, the idea of Star Wars is just a foolish notion. Planets like ours are so valuable, you would never carry on warfare here if you sought to gain its resources and its advantages. And this is revealed again through the new message, which gives us a window into the reality of life in the universe, not our projections about the universe in which we live. The other thing that the new message reveals that we would have no way of seeing otherwise is the weakness of this intervention, where it is vulnerable, what is constraining it. We think if you have advanced technology, you're on top of the world, you're the master of the universe. But that is not true. What constrains this intervention is that it is not allowed because of local rules of engagement to take any planet by force. No one can take any other planet by force within the area in which we live. If you do so, you bring retribution from a lot of others upon you. This isn't because we have a wonderful galactic government. It's because trade is managed in our part of the galaxy. And this kind of behavior is considered antisocial. So if you want to have influence or gain influence on another, you have to use more subtle means. And that is exactly what is happening through the intervention that is taking place in our world right now. And this intervention has 4 activities. 1 is to reach certain people in positions of power in government, commerce, and religion. The second is to establish a physical presence in the world. This is difficult since they cannot breathe our atmosphere. The third is to influence human thinking, particularly religious thinking, to sponsor a kind of acquiescent attitude about such a great encounter, to pacify and make acquiescent the human population, at least the very small part of the human population is aware of this at all. So, when I have spoken at symposia dealing with extraterrestrial presence, I'm confronted with the impact of this kind of influence, which is much more pervasive and much more well-authored than anything that our governments or corporate powers are attempting upon us. People will say to me, anything is better than what we have. Incredible. People will say, we're their children. We're their progeny. They've come back to claim their own. This is a masterful piece of work, ladies and gentlemen. You want to talk about conspiracy? This is masterful. This makes our covert agencies look childish. And as a result, this intervention has many apologists and few critics. And the way we need to be with this, at least at the outset, primarily, is not as historians or social scientists or people in technology, but as the native peoples of the world. Every one of us, the native peoples of this world. How have native peoples failed? What did they not see when the tall ships appeared on the horizon? What did they not know? How was their own religious ideas manipulated? How was their own culture infiltrated? How were they seduced by technology? How are their leaders either bought off or their populations turned against them? The fourth activity of the intervention is a genetic program to establish a new leadership here, of a being capable of mingling in the human population, but completely allegiant to the intervention, and with certain powers and capabilities imbued in that individual genetically. It's a long-term program, takes a long time, but the results are worth it. You get the world and everything in it without firing a shot. This is intelligence versus brute force. And there are many people, a growing number of people out there who will say, I'd rather have the extraterrestrial here than what we have now, even though they have no idea who they're talking about. Why? Because they've been conditioned to believe the extraterrestrial is a superior being. And they've been conditioned to believe that they should lose all faith in human leadership and human institutions, creating a vacuum of confidence. Now, someone has to fill that vacuum of confidence. What is it going to be? If human leadership is incorrigible, if human institutions are completely corrupt, where are you going to put your faith? The choices become limited. And then beyond that, there's a whole confusion about angels and ETs. And there are many, many books written by people doing channeling about angels and ETs being together, hanging out with each other. And you go in the children's toy stores, and there's inflatable ET dolls for them to play with. Happy ETs, digging up plants, glowing hearts. This is the darkest conspiracy of them all, and the most well-crafted, and the most successful. Now, how is this tied into the great ways of change? There's no accident this is happening now. One is we've created a global communication network, a global economic network that other races can use. Didn't exist 40 years ago. And we're ruining the property rapidly. Would be of concern to someone else who valued it. Now, I want to share with you people today that what I'm saying to you and where I'm coming from is great love, because I love humanity and I do not want to see it fail. And I consider that our opportunity to be a sovereign and free race is a rare privilege in a highly competitive universe where freedom is relatively unknown. The new message is revealed about the greater community, that the real power in the greater community is not weaponry, because everyone can end up getting the same weapons. There's a parity there that can be purchased or stolen. The real power, the real competitive edge in the universe is control in the mental environment. If you can get others to want what you want or to accept what you require, you have won the war and you have not lost hardly anything. We are at the very beginning of doing this in our marketing strategies and in our attempt to influence other nations. We're like in kindergarten in terms of power and influence in the mental environment. This is what is a governing principle in the universe. Technology has limits. I know this will be disappointing to some of you who are real worshipers of technology, but you know, there's no race controlling the universe, and nobody can fly from one end to the other. There are limits to technology, but the limits to the mind have very rarely ever been explored. Now, we all know about the mental environment. We exert influence in the mental environment all the time. We influence our children to behave and to do what we want them to do or think they should do or shouldn't do. We influence our spouse, yes? In every relationship, there's a dominant partner, so the influence is slightly skewed. We influence our coworkers, our friends. This is part of our daily experience. We're vulnerable to how things feel in the rooms that we're in. For instance, I will tell you my experience. Being at this conference is very different from being at a UFO conference. Can you feel the difference in the mental environment? There's always something very odd and strange in the mental environment of UFO conferences, every one I've been to. Doesn't mean they're not excellent and important, but you know, that's a component of them. Very different here. Our education about the mental environment is just beginning. And this is the arena of influence. If you think that people are having influence over you, you're right, they are. And you're going to have to counteract that influence and learn how to do that. And that's part of the gift of this new message. And I'm going to talk about that as I go along. So we have, in the face of the intervention, we have human corruption. We have the loss of faith in human institutions. We have a benign and pacified society in the rich countries and a struggling societies in the poor countries. And the truth is the natives can stop this intervention. But the question is, will they? Do they have the will to do it? Or are they too busy with other things? Too busy to find out what it is, how it works, and how it can be counteracted. Let's take a moment and just be with that. I'd like to just take a moment. Good. I want to assure you that if this intervention succeeds, there'll be no winners amongst humanity. Those individuals who are being used as power brokers or as apologists will simply be discarded in the end. I encourage you then to read the Allies' briefings and see what you think, because it is an immensely compassionate document with great respect for us, even though in some sense we don't deserve it. But it shows us our predicament as a native people emerging into a greater community of intelligent life. And it dispels the fantasies and the wishes and the dreams we have for what contact we should be for us. And the amazing thing about this is that this is the one thing that could unite humanity. This and the great ways of change. The very two things that could undermine and overwhelm human civilization are the two things that can unite humanity. We will not unite over ideology, over religion, over our political system, our economic system, but we will and can unite over the defense of the planet. And this planet will have to be defended if we want to maintain our sovereignty here. That's life. That is life. It's always been that way. What will enable us to be a free race in the universe? There are three things. We must be united, we must be self-sufficient, and we must be extremely discreet. United, self-sufficient, and extremely discreet. We're certainly not united, and we become less united in the face of the great waves of change. We are losing our self-sufficiency, which is absolutely critical to any race in the universe being able to maintain their sovereignty. And we are anything but discreet. We live above ground, our conversations are radioed out into space, our conflicts are obvious to any discreet observer. We are hardly discreet. And we are so obsessed with our issues with each other and our power struggles and our competition that no one is looking. There are a few people looking. You know, I watch people out in the world, and you know, it's interesting, when you watch people like out on the street, walking down the street, people almost never look up. Have you noticed that? They're looking down, over, or ahead, mostly down. They're never looking up. That's why when you have a sighting, instead of 10,000 people seeing it, you get 30 people seeing it, because at any given moment, there's only 30 people looking up. As if whatever's up there doesn't matter. It's no concern to us. Our future, our success, and our failure is in the greater community. And what will unite humanity is not high principles, high morality, or high spirituality, but necessity. Because if we go down fighting over the remaining resources of the world, we're setting up the perfect situation for a transfer of power. Either that transfer will happen seamlessly behind the scenes and we'll never know that the Earth is no longer governed by human beings, or there'll be a wonderful arrival of extraterrestrial ambassadors bringing peace and equanimity and high technology to a then devastated and extremely diminished humanity. And who amongst us would refuse them? These ambassadors of light. They who have helped to drive us into desperation will then appear as our saviors. Okay. All right. That's enough darkness. Now we need to come out of the darkness. And the way we come out of darkness is not simply by bringing in the light. We come out of the darkness by recognizing where our power resides, where our responsibility resides. And here's a danger, because if you keep becoming aware of things but do not act, what happens is you become cynical and hopeless. What gives you confidence in the face of immense difficulty is action. Not just any action, but wise action, even if it's doing little things. It's the inaction that sinks people. It better not to become aware if you're not going to act. You'll live a much happier life, even though you won't have a clue what's coming, and you'll probably be, washed out to sea. But in the interim, you'll live in sort of an ignorant bliss. So I say then, if you're going to become aware, you have to be able and prepared to act. You have to take some kind of action. This is really important psychologically for us. Awareness without this, you become grave and humorless, and your life shrinks, and you feel the power of your whole system declining, as if it was just being sucked right out of you. I mentioned the mental environment as being really the great threshold before us in terms of our education. And I treat this environment not mystically as much as I do practically, because as an environment, it has certain forces and dynamics within it. The mental environment is filled, even in this room, with all of our thoughts and emotions. And you can certainly experience that if you choose to pay attention to it. But we have in the world today things affecting our mental environment that are not human and that are very peculiar. I don't know if any of you have experienced this, that the feeling of the world is changing. Not just the appearance, not just our awareness of problems, but the actual feeling is changing, particularly in certain places. I made this a real study for myself, and I took sojourns to places that I knew were either psychically really charged or had reputed extraterrestrial presence. And I was actually rather foolish in doing this, but I thought I wanted to be at the front lines of the mental environment. And one of the things that I was advised by those who advised me is whatever you encounter, do not become emotionally engaged with it. Whatever you encounter. So when I would go do night hikes, what I had to practice, one of the things I had to practice mental shielding, which is something that I learned. But I had to practice complete unemotionality. Because emotion attaches you to these forces. Anger, love, everything attaches you. It's like glue. And there are people walking around who have entities attached to them that they're emotionally engaged with. And many of these entities are not very good, I can assure you. So you cannot be emotional about this. If you have an encounter, if you're an experiencer, or if you're a person who encounters psychic entities entering your home, your space, your bedroom, whatever, do not become emotionally engaged. Do not love it, do not hate it. Because love and hate creates the same result, and that's attachment. Hate creates attachment, just like love. A different kind of attachment, but attachment nonetheless. So in presenting the mental environment, here's the thing, if you remember nothing else that I share with you today, is this one thing, and this is a real gift. There is a part of us that is beyond influence in the mental environment. There's a part of us that cannot be influenced, seduced, induced, or influenced in the mental environment by any force, be either human or extraterrestrial or elemental in nature. And there are elemental forces in nature too. That's another story. This is the only immunity you have in your current existence and in your future existence. And this is the power of knowledge within you. Knowledge cannot be persuaded, governed, manipulated, tricked. It cannot be made to want what you want. It cannot be made to want what anyone wants for you. It is the only reliable thing you have in your entire being. Living in a physical and mental environment filled with increasingly powerful forces of persuasion, both human and extraterrestrial. And it's an interesting thing that very few people have any original thoughts. Even people who are doing spiritual work or conspiracy work, or they think so much alike. They're so influencing each other. They're so caught up in the mental environment that even having an original thought is a remarkable thing. Even questioning a popularly held belief is a remarkable thing. Refreshing, important, wow, significant. This person isn't a believer. Wow, that's great. Knowledge, the very gift, the great endowment from the Creator. If one thing that's going to enable you to navigate the difficult times ahead, the one thing that knows where you need to go, who you need to be with, what your destiny in this world is. The one thing is also the one thing that is beyond influence in the greater community, in this world, in any world, anywhere. And one of the ways that you find this out in your own experience, if you begin to take the steps to knowledge, is you find that what knowledge wants for you is not the same as what you want for you. And this can be a very troubling experience when you find out that something in you is going this way and you want to go that way. But this is a very special experience because this proves to you that you're not inventing this. This is not a fabrication of your personality. This is not some self-created angel that's going to bless you in everything you want, like a divine stamp of approval. Knowledge has somewhere to go. It has a destiny. It is not interested in your passions, your interests, your hobbies, your loves. It has a destiny. This is your destiny. If you can accept this and allow this to emerge, you will become ever more powerful and you will be able to become ever more free of any kind of form of persuasion. Now God is persuading you. And you don't need to have a definition for God. You don't need to have a complex theory of God. And you don't need to call God anything. You don't even need to believe in God. But something in you is directing you. You're now becoming an inner directed person as opposed to an outer directed person. This is what's going to give you survivability in the future. This is what's going to enable you to be of service to others. This is the thing that is going to give you the vision of what you must do each day. And you have to do this without having answers. This is not an answer game. Answers are for dummies. Well, I like answers too. But they are for dummies. It's a consolation prize. The other guy won the $10 million and you get, a ticket to the restaurant. This is the power and the grace that lives within us. The intervention doesn't know about knowledge or it wouldn't be here. Because knowledge cannot lead to this kind of behavior. The allies of humanity call knowledge the most powerful force in the universe, and intervention is not using it. This is the very core of all the world's religions, which is your fundamental relationship with God. No matter what faith tradition, or if you have no faith tradition, or you have your own patchwork faith tradition, whatever it might be, this is the core. This is the essence. If you are strong with knowledge, you will not be terrified by the world. You will not be intrigued by the world. You will not be seduced by the romances and terrors of the world. You will not be outraged by human error or corruption. Knowledge just accepts that this is the way it is here. This is the operating condition of humanity at this point in our evolution. Why complain about it? You don't need to go out and solve all the world's problems because there's something out there that has your name on it. You know, without the slums of Calcutta, there would be no Mother Teresa, yes? And so what this means is that the answer is within you, but the calling is not. The calling is out there. And the very conditions that terrify us or that we don't want to live with are the very things that can call out of us. I'd like to read this. This is from Greater Community Spirituality. The very tribulations in the world that you find so difficult and so unpleasant are the very things that can call out of you the greatness you have come to give. Do not then condemn the world when in fact it creates the right conditions for your redemption. Every one of you has a destiny, and that destiny is to serve humanity in some specific way in alignment with certain people. And those people become then your relationships of higher purpose. But this is not self-created. This is not doing your own thing. This is finding something in you that's guiding you to do something. And you have to be able, perhaps in a less dramatic way than I had to be able, to go through this process of revelation slowly, without trying to be someone, without trying to define it, without trying to assign yourself a label. You have to let this thing emerge. It's going to take you step by step. You have to have that much faith and that much humility and be willing to relinquish a certain amount of control over your life to let this emerge within you. It's not going to emerge all at once. No big aha, no big revelation where it's all clear to you now about who you are. Sorry. You go to the end of the line. This is an emerging revelation. This is something that's going to take your life from over here and bring it over here. And knowing how much we hate to change, yes? Hate to change, how unpeaceful that is, to get from here to here, it's something that has to be done sort of incrementally if you want to keep the person intact. Now, there are events in life that can utterly change our life traumatically, but most people never recover from them, either psychologically or physically. The conditions that we're facing with the great ways, with the intervention, is a calling. It's an immensely, incredibly dark thing. It also has the calling. It takes something of this magnitude to ignite you spiritually. Otherwise, you're just playing with your energy. This is what ignites you. This is what brings your service to the world. Not because it's what you want to do. I mean, if everyone did what they want to do, we'd have a world full of healers and musicians and poets and gardeners and, and no one's going to take out the trash. No one is going to deal with, the problems of getting the water to your house. So it's this kind of thing that restores people's integrity and gives them power and confidence. I'd like to share with you this quote from Abraham Lincoln that I particularly like. It says, "The probability that we may fail in the struggle ought not to deter us from the support of a cause we believe to be just." Doesn't matter what the odds are. You don't give your service to the world because you're sure it's going to work, or you're sure the outcome is going to be good, or you're sure that people are going to accept it, or you're sure that it's going to make a difference and the world's going to be much better as a result. You give it to give it. That's your job. Your job is not to change the world. Your job is to give what you came here to give. And evil is what takes you out of doing that. The evil that can operate inside you and the evil that influences you from the outside. This is another reading from Greater Community Spirituality. This is, by the way, really the theology of contact here. Greater Community Spirituality. It says, therefore, do not seek understanding. Seek involvement and experience. Knowledge within you knows exactly what you must do in life, what you must aspire to, what you must accomplish. It cannot be confused or distracted by the pleasures or the terrors of the world. It is not ambivalent, it is not doubtful, it is not beset with painful memories of the past or a dismal view of the future. It is relentless in carrying you towards your fulfillment and your purpose, for they are one. Fulfilling your purpose represents your work in the world and the purpose for your coming here. We have to go into the darkness because the darkness holds the calling. But do not stay in the darkness. As I mentioned earlier, evil is seductive, and you can be turned by it. It's a powerful, powerful force. And I don't mean the old notions of evil like a little devil on your shoulder. I'm talking about all the forces in the world and all the forces operative within you that disengages you from knowledge. That makes you think you're weak and helpless and powerless and can't do anything. That makes you a slave to your wishes and your desires and to your fears. The only thing that's powerful enough to overcome this is knowledge. You alone, with your will only have a slight chance of overcoming it. And even then, you're never quite sure whether you're overcoming it or whether in some way you're assisting it. We have a fundamental choice, and it starts with us. It starts with you. Are we going to fight with each other over who gets the remaining resources of this world, or are we going to unite so they can be preserved and equitably shared? This is not just a good idea. This is not just a social platform. This is a survival platform. Resource wars have already begun. They are happening now, and they can escalate any day. Forget the rhetoric surrounding them. It's all about resources. We're also going to have to change the way we live. We cannot be massive consumers anymore. It's hard for people to change. You know, Tolstoy said, men think of changing the world and few think of changing themselves. But changing yourself is where you start. You have to build your own ark. And it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark, and you're going to have to build your own ark. And you're going to have to get real sober to do it. And you're going to have the inspiration from knowledge that says, I'm going to do this. And it feels good to do this, and I'm going to do this. And I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to find out how to do it. That's your contribution. To be sitting on the sidelines being a critic, you are adding to the problem. The compounding problem of human distrust and human condemnation. Ancient Chinese proverb said, it's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. And this new message that has come to the world is to prepare us for this world to come. Not some future world, not some world on another plane of existence, but this world we know is our world. A world of growing population and declining resources, a world where greater service must be given to humanity by many, many people, not just that rare and inspired individual that we all glorify, but by people like you, people of conscience, people who have been alerted to the dangers, people who are the first to see and to know. This is your gift. It's your burden. It represents something really important. I said at the beginning that, in my view, everybody's out of control. We've been out of control for a long time. That's why we're in the situation we're in. We're out of control the way we live, the way we use the world, the way we interact with each other. And you know, the interesting thing, and all these things that I'm presenting, and I did not go into much detail, is that we really don't have an answer. And you know, it's okay, because it's the truth. You do not have an answer. And if you can accept that, you will unburden yourself incredibly. There's a lot of people trying to come up with an answer in their extremely convoluted ideological system of thought, or their spiritually hierarchical system of manifestation, or whatever it is. But the truth is that we don't have an answer. Knowledge within us has an answer, and knowledge within us is the urging and the urgency of God within us. That has an answer. And it's not an answer as an idea, it's a direction. So your life begins to move. Whoever you are, whatever your age, whatever your condition, you still have a possibility. You still have the opportunity. You still have the calling. But only knowledge has the answer. You can only demonstrate the answer. You can only experience it and share it as it is revealed to you gradually. But now you do not need to have an answer. That means you step out of the way and let a greater power within you begin to arise.